Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Verit Kogan, and it is such an honor to have Ivo Brughmans with us today. Ivo has been doing practice-based research on paradoxical thinking and leading for the last 15 years and has written 4 books on this topic. His latest book is Paradoxical Leadership, Making Complexity an Advantage. In his work, Ivo develops a both-and perspective as a radical alternative to our current way of living, managing, governing, and coaching. He has a deep conviction that this perspective helps create more sustainable solutions to the challenges of the 21st century, providing the fundamentals for a fulfilled and balanced life, for better performing and more innovative organizations, and for a better world. He gives keynotes, leads workshops and training programs on paradoxical leadership, and works with public and private organizations throughout Europe and around the globe. And Ivo, it is such a tremendous honor to have you here with us today. I wholeheartedly believe in what you are sharing. I loved this book, and I really encourage every single leader to pick it up and read it, and of course, to practice what you share. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So how about we start with what is paradoxical leadership and why is it so important in this day and age?
Yeah, well, I can describe it as a little bit the art of bringing together and connecting conflicting goals of competing values or opposing views or different parts of yourself, and let's say combining the best of both worlds, the best of both sides, in fact, and looking for solutions that have both elements in it. And I give you a concrete example. Every value has this counter value, and this counter value is important to having balance. And I saw the other day in Belgium, where I live, often, well, there was a good weather last week, and everyone goes to the coast, and was the coast was crowded, the beach was crowded, but there was an enormous a pile of rubbish of that people left on the beach, and it was really horrible to see. It was terrifying. And well, how can people do something like that, etc. And there was this discussion at the news, the evening news, where you got 2 politicians, 2 mayors of 2 cities on the coast, and with different views on the side. And one said, well, this is really an issue of prevention, of creating consciousness about it. No, said the other. No, this is one really to be forceful and to have coercive action in this. And the other say, well, this is let's say maybe we have to make stricter rules for everyone. No, say the other. No, we exactly know the target group of these guys who do that, so we have not to focus on everyone. Not everyone has to pay this, but in fact we have to focus on this. Well, with of course the risk that you are starting to stereotype. On the other side, you're getting the burden for everyone instead of just addressing the specific group. Well, in fact, you need both sides to have a sustainable solution. And instead of arguing the pros and the cons of one side or the other, well, it's seeing, okay, how can we have a solution that entails both sides, and really to have a long-term effect, in fact, instead of just focusing on the immediate effects. So interesting is to see that every value has a power, but also has this limitation, and how beautiful the value can be. It can be, let's say, inclusion can be a beautiful value, but inclusion can become very exclusive, because we say, well, if you're not inclusive, then you're not part of our team. So it can be, in fact, everything can turn into their opposite. So in fact, it's this kind of balancing exercise, and you do that in policies, you do that in your management of your organization, your strategy, but also in yourself. It is also connecting different parts of yourself and recognizing that you have these different parts. I'm, for example, I found out that during COVID that I'm I thought I was an extrovert, but I'm very much an introvert. So, but you're never, well, you're 50-50 introvert, extrovert, maybe you're 80-20, but you're never 100-0. Because if you're always extrovert, you just lose your energy. If you're only introvert, you get completely inside. So in fact, this is instead of a kind of dual thing, it is a kind of a scale with where you can move in. And it's in fact this aspect of you have these both sides in yourself. Recognizing them gives also this feeling of liberation, allowing that these parts may exist and have value, also the parts that you don't like.
I really appreciated your example and your explanation here, because every complex system, whether it's an organization or at a macro level, our planet, has these polarities, right? These opposing forces that you talked about. And when we get to the extremes, like you said, when it's like 100% to one side, right? Like honoring one value completely to the neglect of the other, then there is disruption, then there are problems, because that's just not sustainable. So tell us a little bit more about what exactly are these polarities, these interrelated kind of opposing forces, and what happens if we don't manage these polarities, if we don't create some kind of a balance between them.
Yeah. Well, I saw that often in my, I worked 25 years as a consultant, a management consultant, and I saw often organizations going from one side to the other, centralized, decentralized, and back again. And it was an interesting business model as a consultant, because every time you have to make the switch after 4 or 5 years. But anyway, this is not a very sustainable way of doing so. In fact, polarities, as also Barry Johnson, that was on your show, says that these are interconnected values, and if normally they balance each other in a very spontaneous way. For example, if you are, for example, rest and activity. If your body gives signals that you are tired, well, you go to sleep. But you cannot neglect these signals and say, well, I'm going to stay awake. Anyway, you have to then you have to pay the price. The system will always balance itself, no doubt about it. But it can be with a big bang, or it can be in a very smooth way. And often we choose the big bang, and that is quite a disruptive way of dealing with that. And the problem arises often when we try to compartmentalize these opposing elements, these polarities, these poles. In fact, we put them in different departments. For example, we get an operations department and an innovation department, and the innovation department only focuses on innovation, and the operations only on operations. And then they have to come together. But anyway, there are clashes, there are tensions, etc. So it is good to have the focus, of course, on both, but also the focus is often at the expense of the connection. So how can we have there, connecting these elements? I saw, you see it also when you want to buy this beautiful, nice smartphone. Yeah, you only see the nice packaging, the nice instrument, but what you don't see is the flow of rubbish going to third world countries when it is discarded. So these streams are completely separated from each other. So there is no automatic feedback loop anymore that makes us think or make us responsible for the effects of a one-sided approach. But now I think we live in a world, as the world has become more interconnected, that the negative effects of a one-sided policy will be immediately felt. For example, after COVID, we focused really on lockdowns and on physical health. But then we saw immediately on the back of that, mental health issues, isolation, etc. So you turn on one side, you see immediately the other side, and that is through the immediate communication where we live in this interconnected system. In the past, we could afford ourselves to go 4 years in one direction and then the next 5 years in the other direction. And now the feedback loops are immediate. And also we lived in this world where you don't have one dominant vision on the world, but you have many visions. And how can you get the best of them together without standing into polarization? What is one of the biggest issues in our society today?
So, given that polarization is one of the biggest issues in our society today, what is the real cost of that either or type thinking, right? Of the kind of extreme, taking one extreme side again to the neglect of the other. What might happen if nothing changes?
Well, in fact, we going so much into the dysfunction that only extreme solutions will work to get us out of there. Well, like I said, the extreme pendulum swings only we get awake when it's not it's 10 past midnight, huh? And then we got all already in big trouble, and then have to have extreme measures to go to the other side. So the fact is, how can we, let's say, be proactive in that, and how can we balance in a proactive way? Because the costs are huge. Huh? You see that, for example, in the US, you see everything what Obama has built up, Trump has broken down, Biden has built up again, and I don't know what's the next step. But that's interesting to say that, and then you see that also in companies. That is that. It's in incredible destruction of value and an incredible destruction of capital, in fact, because everything what the previous board has built up, you have to build up again. And I don't want to be the shareholder that has to pay for all this. So, in fact, how can we? And I think agility is the key word in that. Not the mundane term agility, but really to be flexible in moving between these polarities instead of being, let's say, subject to it and going from one side to the other without any steering. You want to have, let's say, you have to steer yourself. You be on the steering wheel yourself instead of being the victim of this kind of polarities, because these polarities go their own way, and you can either be on top of the wave or you can undergo the wave.
And can you give us some examples of polarities in organizations? I know you've touched on a couple of examples, but what are some of the most common ones that you see in your management consulting work in an organizational setting?
Well, you have them on different levels. Eh? On a let's say on a leadership level, you get this classic one that is between control and empowering people. That's universal. Any type of organization, any type of management, they're all struggling with that, or between structure and creativity, for example. On the organizational level, it's interesting. I worked with a big organization in the Netherlands, and they defined their leadership competencies in terms of 5 paradoxes, and every leader knows that I'm accounted for how well do I balance between both. And one of them is, for example, one company and my own division. So I have to flex between one company, uniformity, and like on the other side, being my own business where I have my own responsibilities. I have to develop people, but I also want to attain results. So results focused people orientation. I want to innovate, but also have a continuity in my business. It's like, say, a government organization. I have to be political sensitive, but I also have to rely on my own expertise and see for the long term, short term. And these are elements that you see in very well. And the central decentral one is, of course, a classic one. I just spoke before our interview to a company, an accountancy company. Interesting case. They say, well, we have the board and we have all these offices around the country. And well, we have a kind of intermediate layer, and these are the district managers. And the district managers have very difficult because they're in between the demands of the board and the demands of the different offices, and cannot do anything right because for the offices, they are, let's say, the complicit of the board, and for the board they are howling with the wolves. So they say, well, maybe you can give them a training in paradoxical leadership. So I say, well, I think that is not a solution. In fact, that is on a superficial level probably a solution. But anyway, the issue is, the deeper issue is that you have to communicate between the central to the decentral and having this flow of information going up and front. And you have this solution. This solution is having a function called district manager. But maybe you don't need district manager, but you need, in fact, a way of having this continuous feedback loop from the bottom to the top and back, because now the district managers is kind of bottleneck because everything is stuck there, and they're to blame for everything. So it's interesting to see the system as a whole, how it functions, instead of focusing on a specific solution, an instrument, and therefore it's asking the deeper questions. And I think that's also the key of paradoxical leadership. It is about, I think, asking the questions is more important than giving the answers. I give you an example. If you go to the central decentral one, yeah, well, it is what is the benefits of one and the other? I rephrase this dilemma in a kind of, I call it paradoxical challenge and a question. So how can we? Why do we have centralization? Because it gives efficiency, economies of scale, etc. So the question is, why? How can we create economies of scale and efficiency, but on the other hand, be close to our clients? Because that is the reason why that we have these central units. And asking the question is something that I want also to make collective, not something that very smart board or directors have to think about and find a solution. No, this is a thing of that navigating together and having this dialogue. How can we do that? Because that is also tapping into the creativity of your staff, of your professionals, of your leaders, and having that discussion together. And the solution to that can be temporary this or that, and it can be going more to the left or more to the right, depending on the context. Context is changing. You don't always have to have let's say, a both-end solution, but maybe you can say, well, now in this crisis situation, you need to be more central. In this innovation situation, more decentral. But that is a kind of conscious balancing that you do together. So my next book will be about the paradoxical dialogue, because leadership is always in a kind of context of interaction, of exchange. And well,
yeah,
I don't know
I
if
know you
this
have a
was an
great.
answer to your question.
It was. You gave us a lot of great examples, and I know there's a chapter, in this book in Paradoxical Leadership as well, like around the dialogue and how important that is, and how to do that. And I really value that you are helping people to differentiate between some situations where we may need an either or solution, and others where we may want more of a blended solution, right? Which, is a both and. So I know some of the ones that you've discussed in terms of the types of solutions are, a separated solution, compromise, and then of course a paradoxical solution. So would you be able to just quickly kind of share with us what are the differences between those four types of ways to engage with polarities?
Yeah. As I wrote my first book in 2013, in the process of writing in 2009, I thought, well, I have something. But then I took a sabbatical for that. But then 2 weeks before my sabbatical ended and I have to return to work, I found a thread in my and I start pulling it, and the whole system collapses. So I said, well, how is it possible? It was valuable, but the whole system collapses. And I think the key thing was that I thought at that moment that you always have to have a both-end solution, that you and a kind of synthesis that is beautiful, etc. But that doesn't work in practice. In fact, it is more important to be aware of these both polarities. I have 3 steps. First is the most important step is recognizing and naming this polarity, because they are under the surface. So I have to unveil them. What are they? That's the first step. That's 50% of the value, but also 50% of the work. Then you have to value both sides, because one side is have more appreciation than the other, and what else? What is also the value of the other side? And the last point is connecting. How can you connect them? And there is not, like you said, there is not just one way. You can just have say, well, okay, we have these 2 sides, but anyway, we go into compartmentalize in one side or another, and that's fine for a temporary solution. That can be fine, or we can find a kind of compromise, but is also feasible. A little bit of that, a little bit of that, with the risk of having, let's say, wishy-washy something in between that doesn't work. Or you can have, let's say, this beautiful creative combination. But I worked it out in this polarity wheel with these seven possibilities. But every way to combine them has its advantage and its disadvantage. And it's more about having the conscious choice. What do I choose in this situation? Instead of, well, we all have to strive to have the perfect synthesis, because the perfect synthesis, sometimes that is something that is so intangible. It's sometimes it just happens. You cannot engineer it. For example, you take a personal example. You walk on the beach. You walk on the beach, and you have this, let's say, this you're on the same time melancholic and on the same time very happy, and at the same time, well, and it is there, but it disappears also. So it's very intangible. While if you compartmentalize that, I'm this, and afterwards I'm that, well, that's much more manageable. So it's also looking what is feasible, what is useful, and making these choices in a very pragmatic way. I have organizations who use that wheel. If every time they have to make a big management decision, it's okay. Here we have to find for a new combination between both. What are we going to choose from this menu card of solutions? So that can help.
Yeah, thank you. So what I'm hearing is that the essence is really consciousness, is really whatever decision you make. Let's say you've got two opposing points of view, solutions, values, to become conscious of what really is the polarity, to go, as you said, kind of a level below what is being manifested that we can see and hear and smell, taste, touch. And so how do we do that? How do we go one level down, so to speak, to really understand what is the underlying energy underneath polarities?
Yeah, I think, well, like I said, I think it's the most important, but the most difficult part of doing, because in yourself, if you look at yourself, you have this sense of irritation, of tension, but you don't know what it is. And well, you feel uncomfortable, but you don't know what it is, unless you're going to see what 2 sides of myself are struggling with each other. One side want to be very empathic towards the other, otherwise the other side want to be very assertive and to have strict boundaries. If you can give words to that, and then you say, oh yes, this is it. And I think the aha erleb is like, it is often when I ask managers to coach each other on their polarities. I do that with a kind of constellation exercise, and this aha is there when Yeah, you have the right polarity. This is really, and then you see people have the energy flowing. This is really what I mean. It is not about them. For example, I saw someone looking. Well, is it my polarity is between rest and being rest and activity? Okay, that's that. But then start digging deeper. She start crying. She get emotional, and well, rest is about being good as I am, not doing by something doing, not, and activity is, yeah, being good, being accepting myself because I do something. And that was something triggering at the core polarity with herself. So that is, and that then you see the eyes glinting, or you see, well, there you feel this is the right spot where this is really the core polarity of such a person. In an organization, it's great to have this conversation also, because you get all kind of issues, tensions, etc., and then you see different tensions coming up again in different topics, and then there's the discussion about a new learning system, then there is a discussion about a new pedagogic system, etc., and it's not about the content, but it is really, and if you go deeper into that, it's even not related to the content. It is really about people being not recognized. For example, the advocates of having this innovative learning system, the innovative learning methodology, they are the young generation. And in fact, they don't feel recognized. They don't feel heard. On the other side, the people who really want to keep it as it is, they are the people with 20, 30 years working in the organization. And they don't they are discarded as old dinosaurs, etc. So it's more question of recognition than it is of content. And therefore, it's interesting also to we tend to focus if someone comes with an extreme solution, then you have the tendency to focus on the solution and to explain exactly why it is wrong and why doesn't it work and how terrible it is, and to come with a moral judgment, etc. But it's interesting, much more interesting. And then you get into a polarization, because the more you get into this point, the other goes more into the other extreme. It's much more interesting to ask the question, okay, why is it important for you? What is underlying it? What is, how can this help you? And in fact, then you get really to the essence of things. Also, the aspect of curiosity, of appreciative inquiry of what is really below the surface. But we in fact we need to disconnect the content that can be horrible, but and that's all can be very negative, but we have to focus on the underlying values, drivers, needs, aspirations that are always positive, but they can be deformed also. They can become really a very nasty form, because they have not recognized, and the less they are heard, these needs, the more they get extreme. If people are not heard, for example, yeah, people are shouting louder, and they get more into extreme solutions, and etc. So it's, and then it's the pitfall to focus only on this manifestation and put our moral judgment on it. And of course we have to do that, because there are things that we have to condemn morally and legally, etc. But that is one side of the story. The other side of the story, how can we prevent it? Why are they become so extreme? And what is the underlying positive drive that we can transform into something positive? If someone is, let's say, doing extreme things, why is he doing this? Maybe this is aspect of recognition or whatever, and how can we channel it in a positive way so that you can, let's say, contribute to society, etc. So that is this effort that we have to do, and that is quite difficult, but because our reptile brain focuses mainly on the surface and want to get is full of emotions and we forget then to go on a deeper level.
Yeah, and we see that especially during times of change. That, in this change curve, right? As soon as we kind of hear about or we are aware of a change, or we launch a change in our own life, there's kind of a dip, right? A dip in how we feel and a dip in productivity. And that's because oftentimes we go and we experience, like anger, right? We, in our reptilian brain, we're kind of wired to look outside of us because we want certainty, right? There are parts of us that want safety and security and certainty, familiarity. So we get angry, we blame, we get defensive, we hold on more tightly to our pole, so to speak. And it makes it very difficult to be curious or compassionate about the other side, right? To ask questions like, what's important to you, as you invited us to do. And then, of course, that doesn't work. So on a human level, typically we dip, emotionally into disappointment, sometimes depression. And until we really accept the change, we're not, able to really be adaptable, right? Be more agile, be more flexible to see other perspectives and adopt a more paradoxical solution. So I think that the issue really is, or the opportunity, I should say, really is that level of consciousness that when we're experiencing that wobble, that, somebody's violating something that I believe in, or I myself am violating something that I believe in, to get really curious and go inward and label, as you said, like what is the real issue here? What's most important to me? What am I feeling, right? A part of me is feeling this and a part of me is feeling this, right? And to really understand, as you said, that this is really an inner world issue. It's being projected in the outer world, in our teams, in our organizations, our families, and so on. But it really is all in our minds, as you wrote in the book, where we have these opposing needs and values and expectations and intentions and so on. And so when we're able to, and I call this play actually, to play the game, the mindset game, because oftentimes it has to do with opposing extreme beliefs when we get into, the kind of very extreme polarization, very, very rigid type of polarization, is because of extreme beliefs, which oftentimes are deeply unconscious, right? And so when we are able to play the game, we're able to do what you essentially talked about, which is to understand, what is it that really wants to be heard, to be spoken, to be expressed? What is the deeper need there? And so, I say kind of just pause and label, right? A part of me feels this and a part of me feels this, right? To really label what is that inner polarization that's happening, to just kind of understand what is that inner tension, that inner war, so to speak, and then to activate the heart. And there are different techniques for doing that. Really, it's about accessing, a place of elevated emotion to be able to get into a whole brain state, Ivo, to even like perceive, things more objectively, right? To be able to, be curious about another person's or another side, so to speak, perspective. And when we do that, then we're able to yield the over attachments that are creating the extreme. And we just kind of, as you very clearly share in your book, and there's a great diagram for that, kind of like stay within the lane, right? Not go to the extremes.
Yeah.
Creating a more coherent state, a more coherent approach, which ultimately is helpful for not just ourselves, but also for others, and of course for our planet at that highest level. So tell us a little bit more, if you can, about what does a leader do if they're in a situation that they've got some polarization in their team, right? Some of their team members, let's say, want to change and some prefer to maintain stability, as you kind of said in that example, right? Maybe we've got the newcomers and maybe the ones that have been there forever. How do we manage that? What do we do as a leader?
Yeah. Well, the different aspects. I think a key aspect is how we normally do change, and change we normally have the idea of going from A to B, and A was the old thinking, and B, that is the new horizon looking to us bright and future fantastic. anyway, but by doing so, we discard also what people did in the past. So in fact, it's also in this change, making the connection between the existing and the new, and not presenting it as, well, this is fabulous new, etc. Because you only will this only will appeal to the early adapters, but not to the main population of people, because main population will be neutral, and there are also people with kind of resistance. I think another important thing is that, of course, you have to entail this dialogue about, and I think as a manager, you can facilitate the dialogue by, let's say, going away from the content issues and looking what is really down there. And I have this methodology with these two pyramids. I project them. It's fantastic. You have, for example, two teams together, and you start to fill them out. What is underlying this tension between yes or no system or whatever, and you come closer and you get this open, let's say, vulnerable exchange, because they're not looking at each other, they're looking at the scheme that they're filling out together. So that is something that you can enable, that you can facilitate, and that's, well, you can do that in a half an hour. It's incredible how that can work. Um, uh, but as a leader, also you have to create, in fact, this environment where it's, and that is also by giving a good example, that both sides are valuable and that you need both sides. And it's difficult, of course, for a leader, because everyone looks at the leader and says on whose side he is, or she is. Therefore, it's often, you're part of the process, and that makes it often difficult. And often it's better to have a kind of neutral person to facilitate this dialogue, including the leader. And I think also, what is giving a strong example as a leader, I think, is us also giving insight in your own struggles and tensions and sharing them with others. And that is that aspect also of vulnerability, because we often share only, let's say, the end result of our decision, but we don't give insight in how we get there and how difficult it was to weigh these different values, one and the other. If you share your tension, if you share your struggle, you make people complicit in thinking with you how to solve it. So it's giving also this example of, right, in a way, these tensions are here to stay. They are you cannot make a final solution. In fact, it's a kind of balancing act altogether. You have to value both sides. And valuing is not only on an intellectual level, it is what like the most deepest level is really, it becomes very personal. It is, okay, you can have a long discussion about the pros and cons of working from home or working in the office. And then you get at a deeper level, well, working from home, these are linked to values like flexibility, autonomy, etc., and working together in the office, we'll say cohesion, collaborations. But that's values. But really, the personal needs is, well, you don't trust me if I work at home, or oh, if I work at home, I have this beautiful company car and this beautiful office that is part of my status. I cannot show this, so they will not say that. But these are the deepest level. Often the resistance is on that level and not on the intellectual, the value. They will tell you a beautiful story about why it is important, but it's really about status. And it's nothing wrong with that. And it's also valuing that, because every person wants to be seen, everyone wants to be valued. Everyone wants to have status, but I prefer that people have status by, let's say, showing off that they are altruistic and good and giving donations, etc., then they're starting a war. There are different ways of let's say, bringing this status need that we all have in practice, and you have bad things and you have good ways to. So I think it's looking at ways how to. It is not resisting human nature, because human nature is as it is. But how can we transform it in a way, in a positive way, instead of going against it, going with the stream, but taking the stream in another direction that is more positive. That, yeah, I think that is a key thing, because we only want to go against things, and that makes it only worse, because everything what you will block will become bigger. And you can go with it. In the book, it is also called the paradoxical intervention. That is, instead of saying to your son, smoking is bad for your health, you have to stop, and you can better give him a package of cigarettes and say, well, you have 2 hours to finish it. And then probably the self-correcting mechanism will be triggered with your son, instead of, well, the more you go against, the more it will become fine and great to smoke, because it's not allowed, something like that.
What an awesome example of this, because it really is when we're very rigid that our extreme kind of perspective, or rigid perspective, what's right, what's wrong, what's, black and white, can trigger even more the other side to go to their, polarization, to their extreme. And, one of the things that I love that you shared is around, being vulnerable as a leader, right? Because a leader is human, and they may have some bias toward one side or the other based on their own experience, their own values and beliefs. And so the ability to just have a conversation, to just bring to our conscious awareness, what is this really about? And ask questions like, how are you feeling about this? What is important to you? And why is this important to you, so that we can co-create a solution that still honors what's most important to the individual, maybe in a more creative, innovative way, a way that over time allows everybody's needs and to be validated, to be heard, and to be respected. And I think that's really the key. And it starts, I believe, with a deeper belief that on some level, the individuals in our life, which are different than us, are shadows of ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely.
When I can see myself in the other, right? When I see somebody else, what I'm really seeing is myself in them, to just be like, right? What if this is some projection of something inside of me that needs to be resolved, that needs to be expressed, looked at, valued, loved, and most importantly, accepted. And, when I do that, then I'm much more likely to bring more heart into the situation. And when I come from a more coherent state, that energy, which is more curious than judgmental, is oftentimes felt by the nervous systems of other people. And they're much more likely to lean in toward me rather than away from me. So at least we can engage in a conversation, that dialogue that you spoke about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this aspect of owning your own shadow sides and being aware of them, because you project them to others. For example, I get very much irritated by people who just go with the flow and everything happens, and I'm very disciplined and controlling and working, etc. So why do I get angry? Well, in fact, because I'm neglecting the lazy person in myself, and if I can accept that this lazy person in myself, this aspect of myself, well, there's an emotional charge on it, because I've learned that laziness, that is bad, etc. But in fact, I'm angry at myself, and I project that to the other person. So self-awareness is a very important thing, because we project a lot of things to other people. And that is the shadow sides we don't want to see ourselves, but we have them. And they are right behind us, and sometimes at the moments that you just don't want to have them, they come in full force, and they, for example, um, uh, years and years we went on holiday with my family, and the first 3 days were fantastic. Was great, new country, wow, fantastic. But the fourth day, I get very, very bad tempered, and well, it was oh, the lousy food, and well, this is, well, I don't like the country, and it's horrible people, and a year later we go to another location, and exactly the same, and we do that year after year, and well, my first insight was, oh, maybe it's not the country, it's not the people, maybe it's myself. Well, that's the first insight. Because, and the way I coped with that was I get angry because I was angry. I get meta angry because I say, wow, this is the occasion that I'm with my family and that we are all nice and peaceful with each other. And I get angry. I got toxic for my environment. How is it possible? So it gave me insight about, right, this is my polarity. And this is interesting way. I got my two poles is one is the whole year I'm very empathic, I'm very empathetic, I'm very client oriented, I'm very service minded, very polite. But I put my nasty person at the end of the bus. And at this moment where nothing has to be done, this person, this aspect comes up, takes my comes to the front and takes my steering wheel. And what can I do about it? Can I be say, okay, now I'm going to be joyful? No, that doesn't work. That only makes it worse. Eh? And getting angry because I'm angry, that makes it worse. But you can observe that. You can say, right, okay, this is the fourth day of my holiday. Maybe I'm going for a walk or something like that, so that I don't disturb my family and the rest of the environment. But what's interesting, most interesting is, okay, I can deal with this polarity in a way that I 340, 64 days in a year, I'm a very friendly, empathetic person, and one day I'm an extreme, angry, toxic person. That can be a way to create a balance. Eh? This is this kind of one way of doing the balance. But another way can say, well, maybe I should look at a way where I can set my boundaries in a more, let's say, empathetic, sympathetic way, so that I don't have to compensate enormously in my holiday. So there are two ways of dealing with this imbalance. Either you say, well, the system will correct anyways with a big bang or in a smooth way. And being aware of this aspect of myself, that is the biggest revelation for me, for myself.
Yes. I
But you
think
don't
for
see
all
that.
of
You see
us.
that for others, but you don't see that for yourself.
What a classic example, and I think that it's really beautiful because, you gave us a great example of how we started this conversation, right? It could either be with a big bang, right, that we self-regulate, or in a more soft, fluid approach. And, the energy is going to need to move from one polarity to the other anyway, right? So, we can get ahead of it, as you said, we can become conscious and allow the energy to move. Because here's the thing, emotions is energy in motion. If it's stuck, right, like in your case, if you didn't allow the anger or the other side of you from the, client situations or what, that energy that was repressed, if that wasn't allowed out, it's going to find a way to move, right? Energy needs to move. So it's going to find a way to manifest outside of us. We're going to create some situation in order for the other side of us to be expressed. And
Exactly.
so I really appreciate that. And, of course, for our listeners also, there is a podcast conversation that we had with Richard Schwartz, Dr. Richard Schwartz, on internal family systems that really highlights a little bit more of this polarization. And of course, there are many therapeutic modalities that allow us to accept all the parts of us and to soften some of the discord, the inner war, if you will, that's happening by bringing even more self-compassion, curiosity, and really just accepting who we are and all the parts of us. And I love all of the tips that you gave us today about how to do that and how to do that on the external, on the manifested level, in terms of really listening to our team members when there's a polarization, really identifying, what is it, being curious, what is it that is really the issue below the issue, and how can we give people a voice, allow them to express what needs to be expressed, and to find some paradoxical solution by bringing these contradictory poles, if you will, together in a more integrated new form. And for that, I'm very thankful to you, because you gave us so many examples in this beautiful, beautiful book of how to do that and how that can really make a difference. Because I think at the end of the day, we all desire inner peace, and of course, peace in our families, in our organizations, and in our world. And I believe that paradoxical self-leadership and team or organization leadership is really at the heart of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
And how can people learn even more about you, Ivo, about this wonderful book and all of the wonderful programs and workshops that you offer?
Well, my website is, but is it paradoxical leadership.com? Of course, there are a lot of articles on it. I think people can read about the paradoxical dialogue, etc. Of course, they can read my book, but anyway, there's a lot of material there that people can look for. And it's interesting because it's on different level. It's on a personal level, it's on an organization level, it's on a society level. So anyway, it's for everyone. Is there an interesting angle to look at?
Thank you. And I'm excited about your upcoming book on dialogue, on paradoxical dialogue, because I think that that's even more of the how. How do we do this? And so I look forward to that. And I thank you so much for doing this important work in the world, really doing the research and creating for us such excellent frameworks and models and ways for us to perceive reality in a different way than we may have in the past, to open new solutions and hopefully even more ease in our own lives. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey, game changers, it's Vered. I hope you enjoyed this episode about paradoxical leadership. Really, one of the keys to effective leadership, effective decision making during these times of rapid change and uncertainty, and sometimes absolute chaos, because there is just so much polarization going on in our world that we really need to be able to hold complexity and make informed, objective decisions that will serve everybody. So hope you enjoyed that. I also invite you to check out episode 179 with Dr. Barry Johnson if you want to learn even more about navigating polarities and this both and mindset. So thank you again for your support and all my love. Bye for now.